we trust the lamb, not the donkey or the elephant.
There's a thing that bothers me because I see it in my own life, and I'm wondering if you see it too. And that is a story in Luke 18 where the Pharisee is praying, "Thank God I'm not like this tax collector." And I find this temptation in my own life right now to say, "Thank God I'm not like these Christians." On both sides.
Yeah.
And in the course of this conversation, it's thank God I'm not like these Trump-supporting Christians, these people who've been duped for the demagogue, or on the other side, it happens too. You thank God I'm not like these woke Christians or these CRT Christians or whatever. And I just know my own heart and how I want to think I'm above and better. I'm not like the Christian nationalists. I'm not like the wokesters. How do you process that? Like, these are your family members, your church people, the people you grew up with. I guess it seems like you're saying they're sincere. Are you bothered by that, or have you worked it out anyway to help me?
Oh, like bothered by that tendency?
Yeah, to declare to everybody, hey, I'm not like those Christians.
Yeah, that's why, going back to what I originally talked about, that it's really important for me to think in terms of systems and structures, incentive structures, and the way that we are all formed over time by the culture that we are immersed in. Everyone does have agency and everyone is responsible for their decisions. And I think what makes it hard with family sometimes is that we know at a molecular level almost, like, oh, that sibling is like too black and white. Like, we kind of know their personality type really well. And so it's easy to just sort of cast aspersions on that. But, I think there are gradations of this. There are people that I've seen over the years who it's not so much that their politics bothers me. It's that they hold themselves out as, they kind of hold themselves out like the Pharisee in that verse did. Like, they're a really good Christian, but I take issue with some of their decisions and the way they're living their life. That seems to me to be dismissive of Christ's concerns. That sort of thing bothers me. And I think it does get to what you're talking about, where when you're seeing moral decisions that bother you at an individual level, of course, that's hard to not be self-righteous. But I do think it is helpful at that point to kind of toggle back and forth between the individual level and the structural level, and just remind yourself, hey, we're all, first of all, imperfect, and we're all, more than sort of our individual choices, we're being formed day in and day out over years and decades by forces that are much bigger than us. And I think that's a good reason to have grace for people, because even if each of us are pretty ignorant or unconscious of all of these ways that the views that we think that we've come to through this rigorous process are actually things that have just been inserted into us by influences, even if we're not aware of that, like, it's still important to recognize it in others.
How should Christians relate to politics? So I go back to something like the 1960s, and there's a civil rights movement, right to vote, Fair Housing Act, all this stuff. And I want to think that I would be the kind of person who was out, right, promoting those kind of civil rights issues for all Americans. But I could also imagine that I could maybe be the kind of Christian going, hey, stop the culture war. We shouldn't be in the culture war. And what I've kind of come to see is that one person's culture war is another person's fight for justice. So you might look at some of the
that's good
issues in Florida around Governor DeSantis and some of the things they've done. And you can look at that and say, oh, look, he's fighting the culture war. Other people look at that and go, he's fighting for justice. Civil rights movement, same thing. So how should Christians do politics? Or I don't think you're advocating that Christians should abstain from politics, but I just don't know a way forward.
Well, I think one maybe helpful thing would just be to say that politics begins at the local level, and if you can find ways to live out your faith, and particularly, I think, Christ's command to be vulnerable in the world on behalf of those who are, in need of help. If you can find ways to live that out in your daily life, that will become political. And I'm sure many conservative evangelicals would say, like, things that they're doing on behalf of the unborn for abortion would be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that many people who are more progressive would say that things they're doing for fair housing are part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe the next step would be to try to move out of your comfort zone of issues. Maybe not from abortion to fair housing or from fair housing to abortion, but somewhere in between. Yeah. Expand the range of things that you're working towards justice on at a very individual local level, beyond just sort of your one pet issue, I would say. And then also, I would think another good thing for people to do in terms of political engagement is to have conversations with people who think differently and just listen,
mm-hmm.
And not argue.
Well, I think that's a huge one, because what I've learned just myself in personal experience and then talking to other people is that when you don't know people who think different than you, it's easy to demonize them. But you kind of understand at some point that Trump supporter that you're angry at is, volunteering at a homeless shelter, and that progressive that you think is ruining the world is the one who brought your family a meal when you had a baby or something like that, right? And that people are more than their politics. They're more complex than their politics, and we kind of tend to at least be tempted to narrow people down and define them down to their political beliefs when we don't have a relationship with them. Let's go back to your church that you grew up in. It was pastored by C.J. Mahaney, at least for a number of years that you were there. And his name's not really been in the spotlight for, if people want to look into it, they can for good reason in the last few years. But he was a big name in evangelical circles for a long time. And was kind of well respected. I didn't know him. I didn't really follow him that much, but I did benefit from his book. So he had a book on humility that I would do with men's groups, that I would lead, and they would all love it and felt like they really learned something about it. And what was so weird about that is that he's got this book on humility, but it turns out he lost some of his luster and kind of stepped out of position for being an authoritarian or for intimidating people and that kind of thing. And I'm just wondering, as you watched all that, and of course it's more complex than I'm presenting it here, but as you watched all that go down, did you ever just think, these people don't even believe what they're selling? Like, I just want to walk away. I mean, it's not just C.J. Mahaney. Why pick on him? I mean, it's Ravi Zacharias or the problems at Hillsong or Mark Driscoll. Did it ever just cause you to go, I don't even know that these guys believe what they're saying. I'm out. Hey, I'm Keith. Thanks for watching the video. If you're interested in ending tribalism like we are, we have a podcast and a book. Both are called Truth Over Tribe. You can listen to the podcast on Apple or Spotify, and you can get the book off Amazon. I hope you'll check them out.